RDAP Dan here, Federal Prison Time Consulting. Hope everybody's having a great Thursday night. And tonight we got Tom Root with us for part two, talking about the FSA, compassionate release, and everything in between, and what we should and can expect, the good, bad, and ugly. Tom, how you doing? Good evening. And Tom may cut in and out there. I know you're having some bad weather over there in Ohio, you were saying, right?
Yeah, we call it winter.
You caught winter. Yeah, we don't catch winter here.
Yeah. You're not missing anything.
So a couple of weeks ago, we did a video, Tom, you and I, and we were kind of telling people there was a January deadline, and that came and went. What should people be looking forward to? What are some of the updates that we want to go over?
Well, I suppose the first thing we want to talk about is the Sentencing Commission.
Okay.
You know that back in 2005, the Supreme Court held that sentencing guidelines don't have to follow them. That's true for everything except compassionate release. Compassionate release, the statute, which is Section 3582C of Title 18, requires that the court apply the Sentencing Commission's policy statement. Am I cutting out again, Dan?
A little bit, but we're catching most of it.
Okay. Well, okay. You're way ahead of me here. We should have.
Am I in the wrong one?
Yeah, you are.
Oh, my bad. So let's you continue. You tell me when to pull it up.
Okay. And meanwhile, I'll keep going. The Sentencing Commission 13 that gives its position on how compassionate release is supposed to run. Under the statute, courts must follow 1B113. 1B113, though, was written back in the day when the Bureau of Prisons was the only entity that could bring a compassionate release motion. Inmates couldn't bring it, families couldn't bring it, president couldn't bring it. Of course, the president could pardon, but only the Bureau of Prisons. And Congress got pretty upset because the Bureau of Prisons over years was famous for, one, not granting them, and two, taking so long to grant them when someone would come in who was dying on death's door that they died before they got out. In the First Step Act in 2018, we there? Did I cut out?
You're good.
Okay, good. In 2018, in the First Step Act, Congress changed compassionate release so that, as you all know, anybody can file for it. The inmate can file for it. Inmate's family can file on the inmate's behalf. So the standards of 1B113 were kind of strict. It had to be a medical condition from which the inmate couldn't recover, or the inmate was over 70 years old and deteriorating badly and had done a certain amount of time, or the wife was dead, leaving the inmate husband, sole provider for the kids, or the wife was an invalid and inmate had to go home and take care of her. Those were pretty much the standards. There was, which said any other extraordinary and compelling reason for a sentence reduction as determined by the director of the BOP. That made perfect sense back when the BOP was the only entity doing compassionate releases. But once First Step Act passed, then the courts didn't know how to apply this policy statement. Could an inmate ask for any other extraordinary and compelling event? Could the inmate argue that COVID put him or her in danger? Well, what happened, as you may recall, is at the same time First Step Act passed, the Sentencing Commission lost its quorum. So we've gone now for 5 years. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold, which is the Sentencing Commission went 5 years unable to pass any new guidelines. Couldn't amend the guidelines, couldn't amend the policy statement. And the courts in most of the circuits finally addressed the problem by saying, well, the statute says we have to apply any applicable policy statement, and 1B113 simply is not applicable because it only talks about the director of the BOP.
Right.
Well, we have a new sentencing commission. Biden finally got around to nominating people, and we installed them last summer. And it is a pretty good sentencing commission. It's got to have 4 Democrats and three Republicans. But they're people who care an awful lot about sentencing. When I saw the list of nominees, I thought, this is like a dream. I couldn't have picked any better ones. Well, the Sentencing Commission got right to work last fall, and a few weeks ago rolled out the new 1B113. Now, there are many steps to get the guideline approved. First, they put it out in draft form, and anyone in the public can comment on it until March 14th. After the comment period ends, the Sentencing Commission will read all the comments, and it may tweak it, it may not tweak it. And by May 1, the commission will adopt as proposed amendments the 1B113 as well as everything else they proposed. You can go to the Sentencing Commission site if you want to see all this. They're like 113 pages of amendments they're talking about. But the very biggest amendment is 1B113. 1B113 has been changed to do a lot of great things. First, obviously, a pandemic gives an inmate reason to, is an extraordinary and compelling event. Sentence disparity, a change in the law that has not applied retroactively, such as the changes in 924C, the stacking consecutive gun sentences. That has changed. In fact, just about every complaint district courts had for denying compassionate releases has been cleaned up by this draft. It's going to be very, very different when we get to file under this new guideline. Well, the guideline, as I said, will be adopted formally as a proposed guideline by May 1. Under the statute, Congress has 6 months to veto any or all of the guideline amendments. I think Congress has vetoed 2 of them in 30 years, both of them crack and cocaine amendments. So anything that is adopted May 1, in all likelihood, is going to be permitted to go into effect on November 1. But that doesn't mean we can't do something about it now. We are already pointing to the draft 1B113 because courts have been saying, even though the old 1B113 doesn't apply, its persuasive authority as to what the Sentencing Commission thought compassionate release should be. And now we can say, well, you want to know what they're thinking now? Look at the draft. I mean, the more liberal and forgiving. I think opportunities for filing for compassionate release are going to be much broader than they were before. Now, what will courts do? I don't know.
How hard is it going to be? How hard will it be for people that want to file? Is it something that people are able to do on their own? Should they be using an attorney? Should they be doing pro se?
Okay, Dan, I'm sorry I lost that whole question.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good now.
So how hard is it for somebody once this is ready? How hard is it for somebody to file this? Should they be going through their attorney? Is it something that they should be trying to do on their own? Is it something that they should be reaching out to us to try to look into for some assistance on?
One from hiring an attorney. Attorneys know the law. Attorneys are licensed. It's good to use them. That being said, the attorneys aren't cheap. And if I were going to do it, I probably would look for somebody who has done a lot of them. Dan and I have done a lot of compassionate release work for attorneys who simply don't have that come into their office that often.
And that's kind of the problem, right? Is a lot of attorneys just haven't done these. So they're kind of shooting in the dark where you've got quite a bit of experience. So if somebody is going to use their attorney, in many cases, we've done it, presented it to the attorney, then the Then the attorney filed it, or in other cases where there was no attorney present, we prepared it. Then it was filed pro se.
Yeah, it's happened both ways. The you I said, had to go in for an operation a few weeks ago, and I was on the table, and I said to the doctor, this is pretty cut and dried. Why don't you just give me the scalpel and I'll do it and save the money? Uh, Same principle. Um, it's easy to uh, screw up a compassionate release. They are very fact intensive. I've seen guys go in and argue with 25, 30 pages of uh, citing cases. Well, Judge X did it over here. Look at this case in the Ninth Circuit. Yeah, that's great, but the court needs to see facts showing that your situation is extraordinary and compelling, and those are two different standards. You just can't call it that and be done. I'll have guys say, well, we've had a terrible time here at I'll pick on Thompson Camp. Guys, fine, but is it extraordinary? I said, well, sure it is. I said, no, because it is an experience that was common to everybody in the BOP. They were all locked down. They were all eating bologna. They weren't getting wrecked. No one was happy. I said, it was miserable, but it was not extraordinary. You got to show how what happened to you is a lot worse than what happened to anybody else.
Right.
And then it's got to be compelling. Guys say, well, I should have gotten, I had a guy who had an ankle injury, and he said, it took him like 8 months to get it fixed and it hurt a lot. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but you can try. I just don't think it's going to be compelling to the judge.
Right.
You want to look for, I face a lifetime of wife is suffering from cancer and the kids are at home and she just can't cope with it and going through all this treatment. Had a few like that. That didn't precisely fit into the old 1B113 because the kid still had a caretaker at home. It's just she was pretty sick and the wife was sick, but she wasn't disabled. Now under the new 1B113, that's fair game. But you're going to want to fit it into the guideline. You're going to want to emphasize, especially what we call the 3553 factors. Courts are supposed to look at the sentencing factors to ask, is my cutting this guy's sentence or this woman's sentence, is this consistent with sentencing? Well, that's tricky because obviously they thought the sentence they gave you at sentencing was just and sufficient for what they wanted to accomplish. So you've got to show that 3553 changed because they never anticipated that you'd be going through this. Works for some courts, it doesn't work for others. And I got to tell you, I've had a few that were slam dunk and they didn't get compassionate release. I had a few that were Hail Marys and they caught them in the end zone.
Yeah, isn't that crazy how that happened? We've had a lot of those where it was kind of almost telling the client, you're taking a wild shot in the dark here, and then that ends up getting approved. Where somebody else, they checked every box and it would come back denied.
And this is one of the problems cited by the Sentencing Commission, and it may be a function of not having a 1B113 to apply. If you were in the District of Oregon, you had a chance of getting compassionate release. 7 out of 10 got granted there. If you were in the Eastern District of Texas, you had about a 1% chance. And I mean, the Sentencing Commission has the tables. You can go to their website and read their report. But we talk about sentence disparity being a bad thing. And for 2 years now, I've been shaking my head saying someday we're going to look back on compassionate release during the COVID period and say there was no greater offender of disparity anywhere in the BOP.
Now, a lot of the problem is a lot of inmates have problems even getting this information that you're discussing, unless they really know where to look from the inside. And I know you send this information to a lot of the people on your mailing list. But inmates or families of inmates right now, what should they be looking at in order to find out if they qualify? And I apologize, guys. The audio issues tonight are a little frustrating, I imagine, for those of you listening in. Um, if you do want to get this information to your loved one inside the BOP, we have a new transcribe service here where if you would like this video that will be transcribed into a format, whether email through to you guys in a PDF, or if you'd like us to send it directly through Core Links, there's a link in the description of the video where you can find out more about that. And I also just posted it in the live chat. So if you do want to find out about getting this video transcribed into text format, fill out that information that we just sent you. So Tom, what should people be doing right now to find out if they qualify? What are some things they should be looking at?
Well, you've got to have the extraordinary and compelling reason. It could be a family problem. It could be medical. Got a couple guys with cancer who haven't been getting treatment. Has heart problems, and they said we got to do coronary bypass because your veins are too small for stents. Well, coronary bypass is pretty invasive, and his loved ones have contacted the Cleveland Clinic, and they said, "Oh, we can stent something that small." So the argument is going to be, "I'm going to get substandard medical care because these people can't do any better." And of course, we're going to spin into that too. That BOP is going to save a ton of money because this surgery isn't cheap. Even stenting's not cheap. But you got to find the extraordinary and compelling reason. You had better be able to show that you've done well in prison, rehabilitation, your pattern, your recidivism score is low, and that you've been programming. Rehabilitation is not a grounds for compassionate release by itself, but everyone wants to see rehabilitation on top of everything else. It's just like frosting won't make a birthday cake, but you don't have birthday cake unless you put frosting on it. It's the same principle.
Okay.
That's the kind of thing. What I ask for from people first is I want to see their sentence monitoring. I want to see their pattern. Most important is a program review, which is their team report showing any detainers, any disciplinary problems, all the programs they've done, their jobs, the whole thing, because you want to show the judge that the inmate he or she's looking now is not the same one they saw at sentencing.
And you probably want to have reasons that maybe weren't brought up at sentencing, that were not in the during the sentencing. You might want to find other reasons that could factor in that the judge didn't have a chance to consider at the time of sentencing.
Yeah, and that's a twist. The guideline itself says that just because something was known at sentencing doesn't mean it can't be an extraordinary and compelling circumstance. But on the other hand, you have the judges saying, well, yeah, but I took that into account. Dan and I worked with a lawyer on one recently where there was a teenage daughter who was very sick with cancer. And the court took it into account and sentenced the guy down to his mandatory minimum. But in the 2 months after sentencing, they thought they had things under control. She got a whole lot worse. Yep. And the battle we're fighting, the government's now saying, well, it was fully considered in the pre-sentence report. It was fully considered at sentencing itself. And our battle is to show to the judge that no, things got a whole lot. Young lady's in bad shape. And problem is the husband was the guy with the health insurance. And when that health insurance disappears, she's been going cross country to one of the best cancer treatment centers in the country, if not the world. Her insurance, if she goes on Medicaid, won't cover it.
Won't cover it, yeah.
So there are a lot of, you want something extraordinary and compelling? Well, the family's going to miss you and the kids aren't going to do well. Yeah, that happens. So someone's dying. That's extraordinary.
Right.
So, that's it doesn't, the court, I guess, getting back to the point then, the court can know about it as sentencing, and that's what the guideline says, but you really better be able to show that the judge is looking at something the judge didn't see before.
So where does that take us to? Because now a lot of people obviously are waiting. We had somebody post a question in here. Jenny Holloway, she's asking about credits. People
Oh boy.
still aren't seeing these credits.
Yeah. Fortunately, no one ever asks me about those credits,
No,
except every hour of every day. Well, the earned time credits appear to still be a mess. The BOP keeps moving the cheese. The word we're getting now from DSCC, from Grand Prairie, is February 6th, they'll have everything fixed. Of course, January 6th, we're going to have everything fixed. And before that, it was by December 31st. And before that, everything went online and was fine in October. And then it was back August 1st. You see a trend here.
So it wouldn't be a surprise to see this goalpost moved out a few more times.
Yeah, it would not be. Figured a few weeks ago, and I think I even said it in my blog, that the United States went from Pearl Harbor to the atom bomb in less time than it has taken the BOP from passage of the First Step Act to trying to implement earned time credits. And I said that a few months ago when it looked like they finally had them. They still don't have them.
Right. And this is, so how is this going to affect people that, are there going to be people that should already have been released once this gets updated and technically they're still sitting in? Like, how is that going to, is there going to be settlements taking place? I mean, I'm sure people are going to have to sue for it, but what's the expectation on that front?
Well, I just had one the other day. This woman contacted me. So what do I do? I should be out now, and my out date has been moved back to the end of February. And I said, well, what you need to do is you need to hire a lawyer down where you are, because this lawyer is going to have to file it and then call the judges' chambers and harangue them to do something immediately. Because if you file it yourself, normal course of things, you'll get to the end of February before you have an answer. And
Michael had a quick question, Tom, there, before we get too far away from compassionate release.
No, CARES Act depends on your charges. Compassionate release can be anybody. And in fact, the Sentencing Commission has a table of what offenses have gotten compassionate release. There have been people with murder who got them. Heck, I got a guy compassionate release deported back to Peru who was in for murder, life without, and we got him out at something like 18 years. So
well, it still seems to be a pretty big. It still seems to be a pretty big confusion for people that really do get compassionate release and CARES Act confused, because CARES Act is only going to be in place as long as there is an emergency in place.
That's right. And it's not even, I mean, there are two emergencies out there and only one of them counts. There's the public health emergency, which just got extended until April. But then there's the national emergency, and that's under what's called surprisingly, the National Emergencies Act in 1976. That law passed. We've had like 44 emergencies since then, and something like 29 of them are still in effect. For example, Jimmy Carter declared an emergency over the Iranians taking the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. And I don't know how many of you people remember that. I'm sad to say I do, because the year I got married. But that emergency 43 years ago is still in effect. But the one we care about is Donald Trump's March.
Say that again, Tom. Donald Trump what?
Donald Trump's March 13, 2020 national emergency on COVID, because the CARES Act says that the BOP can send people to home confinement as long as the national emergency is in effect. It got extended. Well, it was a 1-year national emergency. At the end of February 2021, it got extended for a year. February 2022, it got extended another year. Now we're coming up on this year expiring on February 28th, and there's been some pressure on Biden to give it up. Well, under the CARES Act, the director of the BOP can send people home for up to 30 days after the CARES Act. So if CARES Act expires on the 28th, or the national emergency does, then March 20 is the drop dead date, is the last. I keep wondering who is the last inmate to go home on CARES going to be.
That'd be a funny
Now,
review.
yeah, is Biden going to extend it? Well, I don't know. I mean, the big student debt thing, he excused all that student debt. He did that with powers given to him under the National Emergencies Act because he had a COVID emergency. And
So there may be some incentive for him to keep it going.
there are people out there who are saying that it just makes it too easy for him to do stuff he wants to do, and so he might extend it.
I wouldn't put it past that little Muppet.
I wouldn't either, but he caught a lot of heat. The Senate passed a sense of the Senate resolution back in November, to November 15, I think it was, to have Biden end the emergency. People want things to be back to normal. 75, 80 votes. So I had Democrats and Republicans. Biden may pay attention to that. I don't know. I can make a convincing argument that he will extend it. I can make a convincing argument that he won't. But
so who technically qualifies for CARES Act to go home under CARES Act, to make sure we're answering? Because I'm sure Michael already knows the answer to that, but for other people watching that don't really know, there's a distinct line between the two.
Got to be a citizen. You can't have any shots for the past 2 years. Past year. I'm sorry, 300 shot in the past year, or more serious one a little longer. You can't have any violence in this offense or in any background offense. You've got to have a medical morbidity that makes you more likely to be susceptible to COVID. Got to have.
These are the same ones you see like on whenever you see any type of all these pharmaceutical companies pushing these different drugs right now. If you're overweight, if you've got high blood pressure, they're all the same comorbidities that you see all the time on TV.
Yep. And unlike compassionate release, where the old COVID morbidities, the court would say, okay, you got asthma, but it's not bad, it's under control. With CARES Act, all you need to do is find one, because it's up to the staff. I just had a guy who had been sent home on CARES Act, and they discovered they had goofed and he didn't have 50%. So they brought him back, and then they said, well, you don't have a morbidity. And
poor guy.
Admittedly, he's healthy as an ox. And he said, well, I didn't need one last time. And they said, well, yeah, but we goofed.
Man, talk about psych.
Yeah.
Got him.
This is dangerous. Got a few people who have some CARES Act litigation going on habeas corpus actions. And it means that we have to have those done by the end of March. If the national emergency doesn't get extended, then what's going to happen is you get to April, May, June, and the court grants habeas corpus and orders the BOP to reassess somebody under the proper standards. And the BOP is going to say, we can't, because we no longer have authority to send them home.
So people that are somewhat interested in qualifying for this really should start gearing up and prepping for this now, to have any filings prepared and submitted prior to that date, the deadline.
Yeah, I had people going through administrative exhaustion, filing the BP 9, 10, and 11. And when the story broke that it looked like away, I told them, just forget any further administrative remedies, go straight to a habeas corpus and explain to the court that that it's futile, because if you exhaust remedies, it's going to take another 3-4 months, and then you can't possibly get the relief you're entitled to. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of outside of the box thinking. There's so many moving parts here that if people think they have it all figured out based on kind of the skeleton of this, it seems like there's a lot of many moving parts that if you're not paying attention, you can really get blindsided and kind of miss the boat by technicality.
Yeah. And the pay attention if you're watching this emergency thing, because I've got so many people saying, "Oh, well, Biden just extended it till April." And I say, "No, that's the public health emergency."
Right. Two different things.
So, oh yeah, something else that is interesting about CARES Act. Just because the CARES Act's about to expire doesn't mean that the BOP can't diddle with it, and they have just diddled with it in, I think, one of the worst ways possible. There was a memorandum on December 19th. And we don't know exactly what it says because, unlike the other memos, the BOP has not released it. But we do have in an administrative remedy the BOP coming back and saying, well, we have this memo and this is what we've added. If you have more than 5 years left to serve, more than 60 months, and that'd be entirely possible. Let's say you had a 180-month sentence, you get to 50%, which is 90 months, and you still have like 60 months with good time, rolled in, 60 months left. The BOP contacts your AUSA, that is the prosecutor who locked you up, to ask for the prosecutor's views on whether you should get home confinement. It doesn't appear there's any standard. Like everything else I cranked out, do you have violence in your past? Well, that's binary. You either do or you don't.
Right.
Do you have 50%? Are you a citizen? You either are or you aren't. But they appear to be contacting the prosecutor and say, what do you think? And if the prosecutor shouts loud enough, they turn you down. Had a guy that
And
happened
I
to.
imagine most prosecutors are going to shout as loud as they can, unless you're like on your deathbed for real.
Uh, yeah, I guess what I would say is how many foxes are going to say, yeah, you hens can leave. And
Right.
that's what it is. We got a foxes guarding the hen house now. And I mean, I've got one guy who is going to the mat with them, arguing that it's a violation of due process because it's standardless. BOP announced standards, and they have an obligation to stick. Said you shouldn't let him go because he has violence in his past. Here's a case you didn't consider. Okay, you're legitimately screwed because that was one of the standards. But it looks like it's a beauty contest, and the BOP either says, yeah, he's too ugly, or no, he's not. And I think they're going to say everyone's too ugly.
So to recap a little bit, just so everybody understands, compassionate release and CARES Act, two different things. Even when CARES Act dries up, compassionate release still exists, and that's for anybody and everybody that's in the BOP. Obviously, the more intense your crime is, the longer your sentence is, the least amount of good reasons you have. It's unlikely you'd be seeing any type of relief from anything, including compassionate release. And then CARES Act, we still don't really, we don't know when it's going to end. There's still very up in the air on that. And the FSA credits, still kind of questionable as to when people are going to really see that implemented. People that should have it implemented now, even if the BOP hasn't updated it. Is there anything we can do to influence individual situations with helping it getting calculated?
Well, the only thing you can do is that you can contact, or we can contact BOP and say you're overlooking something. I had a lot of people. Well, perfect example. Now, you know that there are like 63 categories that of offenses that have been exempted from First Step Act credits. And Congress did it fast. I remember those crazy days in December as they were adding and subtracting and patching things in. 924C was not exempted until like the last week when they added 924 to satisfy one of the, I think Tom Cotton, one of the Republicans. But as a result, for example, people with sex offenses, you just think, you know how they are about sex offenses, they're all exempted.
Right.
Well, they missed a few. I've got a who his loved one came to me the other day, and she said the BOP says he's ineligible for First Step Act because he has a sex offense. Well, I looked at it, and all you have to do is take the offense number and then do a search down through the statute. They missed this one. It was coercion of a minor or something seamy, but still, it's not exempt.
Right.
So, I wrote I wrote something for this guy to turn into his case manager, and case manager went back and looked and had to contact DSCC, and they said, "Oh yeah, I guess it isn't."
And that's part of it. Like
Whereupon
you,
BOP
because you would
came up.
just, yeah, you would just said, if somebody's not being calculated properly, you need to raise awareness that, hey, something's awry, but it needs to be detailed and explained and articulated properly, kind of back to them on paper, in order to really demonstrate what they did wrong. So it's almost showing them how to do their job, which unfortunately is going to be necessary until, I imagine, the BOP educates itself and the staff gets educated on how to properly do this. Because I'm sure case managers really, I mean, who's teaching them how to do this? Is there some kind of a corporate training, or is it just kind of figure like, it seems like you know more about it than the case manager who's got the inmate's life in their hand?
Yeah. Although in fairness, the case manager is juggling a lot of balls and doing a lot of things, but
Yeah,
by
it's
and
a
large,
bunch of
the
excuses.
case managers don't understand it, and a lot of the calculating is going on at DSCC in Grand Prairie, anyway, and they're just announcing it. A perfect example is BOP's told everybody who has a detainer, you're ineligible, you can't get FSA credits. Now BOP said, okay, you can earn them, but you can't spend them. And there have been a few cases, there are more every week, where people have taken them to the mat in the courts, and the agency is entitled to interpret the statute. And the vaguer the statute, the more right the agency has to interpret it. But here, Congress gave us a long, exhaustive list of these people are not eligible. And beyond that, when it came to detainers, they said nothing about detainers. All they said is if you are an alien and subject to a final order of deportation, you can't get them. Well, they're telling all aliens you can't get them. But that's not true, because the final order of deportation doesn't come until after you get out. It's a
Right.
mistake in the statute, but that's how Congress wrote it.
And unless
And
somebody's going to go in
I
there
got it.
to bring this to their awareness, they're just going to kind of get the shaft by default due to a technicality of how it was prepared.
Yeah, and they're saying, well, we can't send you to home confinement or halfway house because you have a detainer. That's our policy. To which the courts are saying, well, that's true, but there's nothing wrong with taking a year off their sentence if they've got a detainer. The day you let them out, the detaining authority comes and picks them up. So just let them out a year early and have the detaining authority come then.
Yeah, so it's really not change.
Eventually,
It's not changing anything. It's not changing their danger to society. They're still going to be deported. They're just getting the time off.
yeah, that's right.
Now, real quick, to stay on FSA credits, how about people that are getting to spots that there's not programming going on? There's classes that are still, getting figured out. Are they still giving some credit to these people even though they're not doing anything?
Oh, that's one of the beauties of it. The BOP has said that if you have a need, let's say anger management, and you need anger management, and you're on a wait list for anger management, but you can't get in because the class is full, you can go through 2 full wait cycles for that class. You get FSA credits every day you wait. That's sweet. And frankly, I didn't expect they'd do that, because that's very un-BOP like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest problem the BOP has with FSA credits are twofold. First, you know that when you get to minimum, or you're a guy like any needs for programming because you're just about perfect. But so you get credits for what we call productive activities. They say when you're low or when you're minimum and you've fulfilled all your needs, then you can do things. And Unicore can be a productive activity. The BOP has a list of structured productive activities.
Seems like a lot of those productive activities are anything that falls into the category towards like reentry.
Yeah, but what we're missing is there are also supposed to be unstructured productive activities. And the BOP spends about 2 sentences talking about them in the entire program statement. They issued the program statement last November, and you can look at it on the BOP website, 541001, November 18th. And you learn a lot interesting about FSA, but there are some big gaps. One of them is, how do you get credit for unstructured productive activities? They say it can even be rec. I mean, you could be playing basketball and get credit, but get your case manager, your unit team to
Yeah.
approve that as an unstructured activity to get
Good
credit.
luck.
Yeah, good luck. That you go to a case manager and say, I want to get approval for an unstructured productive activity. You say, what? They have no idea what that's about. They have no guidance from. So the next answer besides what is no, I can't do that.
So
And
what happens if ultimately, if the case manager refuses, what would be the channels of the chain of command where the inmate, how would they travel through this in order to get what's coming to them?
well, you're going to have to file a BP9 and get turned down. And after you file a BP9, if you go to the 10, you can do that. But frankly, if I were an inmate at that point, I probably would have my family write to Congress, my congressman, congresswoman, and say, we were promised this and I rehabilitated, our loved ones turned into a wonderful potential member of society, but the BOP's got these activities and nobody knows how to approve them, so he's not getting them. Well,
So when you say somebody should reach out to their, to their representatives, how important is it that you reach out to your representatives in a calm, collected, sticking to the facts and not allowing yourself to become an emotional wreck when you're trying to tell them how unfair this is? Because I imagine anybody, the powers that be, get tons of screaming calls all day long.
yeah, they do. But let me back that up even one more step. If you're an inmate, don't write to Congress, because my take on it is they don't really like inmates. They don't really like people in prison, but they do like the families of people in prison because those families vote. And I tell everyone who wants to contact Congress, say, don't contact Congress. Let's ghostwrite it and have your mom contact, or your sister or your dad,
And
because
that's
then
and
they
that's
can
what
say, yeah,
that's
go
what
ahead.
we've done with a lot of clients is they come to us, we find out who their representative, in some cases like their congressional representative, but it's not the defendants or not the inmates. It's the, like, if it's your mother, we would want to deal with your mother, who her congressional representative is, and then making the request on your mother's behalf. So basically you're asking them to reach out to the BOP on your mom's behalf. So it's not the governor making the request, it's the mother's making the request, but the governor's passing the message. um, and there's been several occasions where we've seen what people were going to submit, and they said, hey, we're getting ready to submit this, what do you think? And then Tom takes a look at it, and the whole thing needs to be restructured. uh, I think it's how you ask the message, how you say it is probably more important than what you're saying. Um, so, because you really, how many shots do you get at this? If you can't keep going back to them and say, oh, I messed up.
Um, you mean what, with Congress?
Yeah. Like if you're going to ask for, if you reach out to Congress and you don't request if you're not requesting it in the right organization, if you're just going in there saying, my inmate's getting screwed, they're doing this to everybody, I want to sue. Really, what kind of request are they possibly going to make? It's going to be a very generic request, because they'll make a request for anybody. But if you put your request in structured, I think it has a higher probability of getting approved.
Yeah, it does. You really have one shot, because if they hear from Congress twice about you, the BOP's heard it once too often, and then father do it, or sister, brother, wife, is that when you get called on the carpet and they start yelling at you, why did you contact your congressman? You say, oh man, I didn't do that. I can't control my family. They're really unhappy because you people have screwed this up.
Right.
And what what I've seen happen time and again is you immediately get the relief you wanted, and then they write back to Congress and say, "Well, Representative, Senator, we don't know what you're talking about. We've given all this to the guy." The first time I saw it work was this guy car dealer who had gotten underwater in the recession, and it was doing, I think, like 36 months. And he had been promised 6 months a halfway house, and at the last minute they took 2 back. And uh, his family, well, his wife contacted her congressman, who happened to be Speaker of the House at the time, John Boehner from Ohio. And Boehner's office wrote to the warden. The warden got the letter and turned it over to, and went down the ladder until it finally got down to the case manager. Case manager wrote back. Boehner said, look, a pissant probably. He said, when I write you a letter, I don't expect some 2-bit clerk to answer. I expect an answer from you.
Yeah, I'm sure
I'll
that
tell you,
went
by
over
the
well.
end of the day, that guy's halfway house problems were solved. But
None.
typically, I knew another guy who, when you write on behalf of an inmate, the inmate has to provide you with this form. It's a DOJ 361. You can download it. It's called Certification of Identity. Inmate has to fill it out and sign it and give the congressman or whatever office permission to talk to BOP about his or her situation. I had a case where the guy,
What was that for? What was that form called again, Tom?
DOJ 361, Certification of Identity. And if you type it in on any search engine, you'll find them downloadable, form fillable, the whole thing. And I had a case where an inmate had filled one out, and his family was anxious to get it. So can you fax it? And the congressman or the counselor looked at it and said, what's this all about? So he told him it was a problem with the case manager. And he said, I don't think you want to send this. Let me look into it. Within 2 hours, this problem was solved. The Bureau of Prisons hates to hear from Congress.
So that can help. That can definitely help if it's utilized the proper way.
Yeah. And the reason I tell people to use their representatives is because in almost all cases, the representatives have a smaller footprint of voters they're representing. So you get more service.
These are your constituents. You're trying to keep them happy.
Yeah. Only exception is like I had a guy in Illinois who needed to put pressure on Congress, and it was the BOP screwing up something in the First Step Act. And I said, don't write to your representative, write to your senator, Dick Durbin, because he's chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And he has, I mean, this is a real hot button issue for him. So he wrote to Durbin, and his problem was
got solved.
He hears from the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. They listen.
Jenny Holloway had a question. I missed it. He worked, attends classes, had a year taken off, and then it went right back to the original release date. So does he still have the credits?
Well, it's a real good question because we don't know why they put him back to the release date, the original date. But what I have been telling people is we waited this long. We need another 6 and 5, like 11 days. It'll be February 6th, and that's the date they're promising everything's going to be fixed. So at this point, you might as well wait until February 6th, and then you got to bring out the big guns. But I would ask him meantime to find out why they took them away. Someone somewhere is going to be able to say, well, because you checked out of RDAP, so you're in FSA decline status, or you're ineligible because we discovered that you have a 924C, something like that.
So I know the last thing that we really wanted to kind of go over here, because, prison, being comfortable in prison is half the battle, and commissary and things like this are really one of the things that give you peace of mind at the end of the day. You sent me over some information that there might be a new policy put in place where they're taking up to 75% of money sent to them on their commissary or their BOP trust fund account that's sent to them from family.
Yep. The Department of Justice has issued what we in administrative law used to call a notice of proposed rulemaking, proposing a rule that is going to change how things are done on collecting restitution, forfeiture, fines, and even tax obligations and child support. And this is, you can thank R. Kelly and Larry Nasser and a few other knuckleheads who seemed to think it was all right to have a ton of money in their accounts. It fired off the Washington Post. So a year ago, the Post did this piece and discovered that, well, I think they said that there was $75 million being held in the BOP trust fund and for inmates, and the inmates were protected by the BOP because the DOJ would try to garnish it and others would garnish it, and the BOP wouldn't let them. 26 inmates had more than 100,000 in their accounts. So you got a few people screwing it up for everybody because R. Kelly had like 50,000 in his account and Nasser had a bunch in his account. And of course, I mean, those guys, what they got convicted of was very public and very ugly, and their victims weren't getting restitution. So everyone's going to suffer. BOP is proposing, or rather the Department of Justice is proposing these rules. And one of them is that money coming in from the outside, they'll take up to 75% of it toward restitution, fines, child support, tax obligation, whatever you got. So that means
is there going to be, are the inmates being notified of this ahead of time, or is it just going to be like one day all of a sudden they don't have money on their books?
Because the money's just going to be taken off the books. And it appears from the rules that when the family sends $100 in, they're going to skim 75 immediately. So all the inmate will ever see is $25. So this is a way to make sure that the inmate's even more miserable, or the family has to suffer even more to give the inmate the money that the inmate needs for tennis shoes or soups or honey buns or whatever they're buying.
Boy, this is going to create some chaos. I mean, the ripple effects there. The effect is going to be from the people that are abusing the commissary to the people that are just trying to survive. Is money that
I'll tell you
earn? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, who else is unhappy with it? The BOP. Turns out the BOP makes something like, well, I shouldn't say makes, but the BOP spends about $80 million a year coming off trust fund purchases, commissary, telephone, email, and uses those for staff salaries. So they say that the BOP.
So the BOP may fight back on this.
Yeah, they pushed back before and said, you're going to kill us. We need that money.
So what about inmate jobs? Is that money up for grabs too?
Yeah, it is not quite so badly, but I believe it is. If you're grade 1, grade 2 or grade 1, they'll be taking 50% of what you make. So if you were grade 1 and you had your family sending money in, you get 25 cents on the dollar from your family's money. You get 50 cents on the dollar from the work you're doing.
So I might not have heard you if you said it before. If are inmates that have criminal restitution, are they going to be affected by this, or is it based on the judge's orders where you don't have to start repaying
restitution, fines, forfeitures that haven't been paid, and then court costs, those special assessments. And once you get beyond that, then states can file for child support, tax, IRS can file for past due taxes. Yeah, it's a free for all.
The bill collector is coming at you in prison now.
Yeah, you get a judgment, file a judgment, and come in and.
This is probably going to open the floodgate big time for inmates putting money on other inmates' books, trying to avoid, they'd rather give that inmate 10, 20% than 75% away, which is going to create shots and.
Yeah, someone who doesn't owe restitution or fine or forfeiture, you get your guy who's in there for a 922 felon in possession. They don't have restitution, and they forfeit their gun, and that's it. And that happens, right away. They'll owe like $100 on the special assessment, and that's all. Yeah, those people will be sitting pretty. They'll be, you can be getting your. All that commissary coming in, you're buying it and getting to skim 10, 20% yourself.
So how long do you think it's going to be before we have another update? You said the deadline right now is set for it could end in April. for the CARES Act. Right now, it's because that's when it's over, unless it's reinstated. Correct?
It's March 30.
Or March 30th. Okay, so March 30th. Are we not
No,
going to know? Are we not going to know if it's extended prior to that date, or do we have to wait until that date to find out?
don't have to wait till then. Previously, when it has been extended, the extension orders come out right about the 18th, 20th of February. So
Okay.
we should know about 10 days to 2 weeks before the end of February what's going to happen.
So we should be doing another video the second, third week of February for sure to give people updates on that. Because those updates, unless you're really looking for them, you may not even know. You may just get blindsided and you're no longer in the grasp of reality anymore.
Yeah, you don't necessarily see it on the news. You kind of have to search for it.
Okay. Well, guys, I mean, the information out there is vast. There's still lots of things to figure out. Unfortunately, I know people come here looking for solidified answers, and prior to COVID and all of this stuff, it was a lot easier for us to give, it was much, like Tom said earlier, it was much more of a binary system where you could just look at things and based on facts, it's how it is. But now there's judges that weigh in, the BOP can weigh in on their decision on it. There's just many things that are outside of the control of what's going to happen, because it's kind of based on how they're viewing it. So it's up to the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah, when I started my newsletter 7 years ago, 8 years, oh no, yeah, 8 years ago, I worried from time to time that I'd have a week where I wouldn't have enough to write about. That has never been a problem.
So your newsletter is stacked for at least the next year.
Yeah. It's
guys,
every week there's stuff I can't fit into the 13,000 characters that make up an email. And I don't doubt they'll be doing it again this week and next week and the week after.
For people that want to get on your newsletter, Tom, because it's a free newsletter that goes out weekly. Right now it goes out to about 10,000 plus inmates in the BOP. What's the email people should email you or they should have their loved one in the BOP send you a request, correct?
Yes. And
okay.
They can say, if they want to read it, they can send one too, because I have a file of people outside who get it every Sunday night at 10 o'clock too. And I usually have a few requests there. The email address is newsletter at.
Say that again, Tom.
Go
ahead.
Start
Say it one
over
more
again.
time.
Yeah. Newsletter at Lisa. That's LISA, followed by a hyphen, a dash, legalinfo.com.
And if you didn't remember that or you didn't hear it properly, send me a message and I'll send you Tom's information. You can either use there's a free consultation link in there if you want to do that. Send me a text, put a comment in the YouTube video, and we'll respond to it there so everybody can have it. I'll probably pin Tom's information in this comment section after we wrap this video up. Also, if you want to donate for a cup of coffee, I just dropped my Cash App information is in there, where if you guys want to send a donation over, they're greatly appreciated. And any donations we receive, we use it for inmates that are less fortunate, need hygiene products, sneakers, things like that they might not have. So it's better to do it through Cash App than it is directly through the I almost said eBay, directly through the YouTube source, because YouTube takes like 60% of it. So Tom, anything else we have that we want to leave people here with? And don't forget, if you want to get a transcribed the transcription of this video to send to your loved one, there's a link in the description. Send me a message and we can give you a price for the transcribed content on this. These types of videos I feel are very important for the inmates to have themselves, because then they can spread it around. So basically, your inmate can get this and give it around to other inmates to make sure that they have the knowledge they have. Knowledge is power. So drink deep out of that cup of knowledge, guys.
Yeah. No, we've pretty much covered an hour's worth of material and barely scratched the surface.
Bill just asked for Tom's info. Bill, check back on the video in about 5 minutes. Go into the comment section, and I'm going to pin Tom's information for his core links to request core links that you can request it for yourself, or what your loved one would want to request directly through core links. And Ron, thank you very much. Ron just gave a $5 donation. Much love, Ron. Thank you. That goes a long way for somebody. A cup of noodles. You can get a couple cups of noodles for $5. So, all right, Tom, I appreciate it, guys. Anything else? You good, Tom?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Enjoyed
Okay,
it.
guys. Well, Happy New Year again, everybody. Hope everybody enjoys the holiday and the weekend. And we've got Valentine's Day coming up next month. So let's get through all this craziness. We'll see you guys mid-February back with Tom Root to see if there's been any updates. But I'm RDAP Dan, Federal Prison Time Consulting, People Helping People, Communities Method, one day at a time. See you guys soon. Peace.